Welcome back, you filthy exiles, or I should say filthy Nephilims, though that wasn't a term back in the days of the game that we're about to talk about. So, obviously, you know, the current league for PoE is a bit lackluster. It's probably an understatement, but without going into too much detail, because there's already enough videos on the internet talking about that, let's focus on something a little bit different. Let's focus on something to do with D2R in particular. And I wanted to sort of tease out, and I've got some footage in the background because I'm actually really excited for this game. But I wanted to tease out some stuff that, you know, I guess general questions, you know, coming from PoE. And, you know, my original OG game that I was, you know, hardcore into was Diablo 2 back in the day when I was a broke uni student. And basically, when I didn't have 2 pennies to scrub together, I did have a battle chest, and I played the shit out of said battle chest. So, 4 key things that I wanted to talk about, and yeah, I thought I would talk about them. So, first thing, endgame. Does D2 have an endgame? Now, in particular D2R, I don't know if they're going to take it in a different direction. It's definitely going to have a leaderboard like it used to, but D2 is a little bit different compared to a game like PoE. So obviously PoE has the mapping system and the atlas and everything, and, you know, master crafting, and we'll talk about crafting soon. Crafting's quite robust in D2. Not as robust as PoE, but still pretty cool. So the end game really in D2 consists of maybe 4 things, if I can think of, you know, pardon me, if I can think of 4 things that drew me to the end game. Number 1, and we'll all have seen it, and there's an animated series on YouTube for it, Bale runs. So for anyone who hasn't played Diablo, Bale is the, you know, the king boss at the end of the game. You know, when you take on, basically you go into the throne room, and then, you know, you get to the world stone, and yeah, you have to kill the final boss. Now, Bale runs, and this is something that we'll cover off more with leveling guides, really interestingly. You know, generally when you play the end game in D2, you don't kill Bale and you farm the throne room and you level up really quickly. You go back, rinse and repeat. There's no mapping systems or anything like that, and, you know, Path of Diablo and things like that have that, but, you know, we're talking about D2R here, and as far as we know, they're not opening it up to mods. But basically, Bale runs are one of the big endgame things. This is how you get a lot of your unique drops and things like that, legendary drops and everything. And also, it's a bit of a flex. Now, we'll talk about difficulty level right at the end of this video, because Diablo is a different game to PoE in every possible way. So maybe the next thing in the end game is the level climb. So there obviously is a leaderboard, and Diablo is very much a flex game, where basically climbing the ladder and being the highest and most OP level is the goal at the end of the day, whereby you get to level 99, and that earns you bragging rights, because in Diablo it is incredibly hard to get to 99, or maybe not incredibly hard, but it's effort, and getting to hell and surviving hell is a whole different level of craziness. Now, muling used to be another thing that you used to do in Diablo 2, so loot muling. And basically what that is so there wasn't a shared chest. There is going to be in D2R, at least that's what they've confirmed. And basically you would have a mule character, and you would keep all your really cool legendaries and everything on a mule, and multiple mule accounts, and sort of just drop an item in between instances, jump in, grab that item, use it on different characters. And that was really good as well, as sort of an end game goal, to have shitloads of loot, because you don't get a lot of stash in Diablo 2, but that's soon to change with the new iteration of the game coming out. The 4th thing that I always looked at for endgame was the secret cow level, and this is where you get Wirt's leg. I think it was a Tome of Town Portal. You chuck it in the Herodric Cube, craft yourself in the Rogue encampment a portal to the secret cow level. As everyone's heard, most fun in the game. 9 out of 10 times, if you're not equipped, the bastards will absolutely murder you, and it's always fun to watch that. So those are a few of the end game things you can do. Now, they're not as robust as Diablo, as Path of Exile. There's no convoluted mapping system and map crafting and all sorts of Cyrus level bossing and everything else. It is much more limited, but because it's so basic, that's what makes it fun, at least for me. And the game is a much harder game, but again, we'll talk about that at the end. Crafting. So item number 2, crafting in Diablo 2 is not as crazy as Path of Exile, but there's 2 ways of crafting in Diablo 2. So the first is the obvious, which is secret rune words or rune words. And there's entire guides, like we're talking about a 20-year-old game. There's entire guides, and I'm sure when we get into the game and, we're out of, when we get to September, I will definitely do videos on Diablo 2 because I'm a huge Diablo fan. I was a Diablo fan before I was an anything else fan. And I still love Diablo 1, and Diablo 2 is one of my go-to games in between leagues, as people would have seen on streams and some of my other content on the channel. So rune words are basically, you get runes that drop throughout playing the game, and depending on where you farm, you can get different levels of rarity. But basically, it's thinking of sort of crafting mats from Path of Exiles. That's what runes are. Maybe a really basic comparison. And the type of item and the sequence of which you set rune words into socketed gear determines the outcome of that gear. So I can't remember any off the top of my head. It's been a little while since I played, probably about maybe 6 months since I've jumped in. But there are a number of runes that you can get in early game that you can farm up with, like Neph runes and things like that. And get really good early game gear, and you can really sort of gear around specific builds, and there are a lot of builds in Diablo 2 which make it an even more exciting game. And every build in Diablo 2 can be well, not every build, but there are a large number of builds that are pretty damn playable, and unfortunately for Path of Exile, one of the things that Diablo 2 has always done well, and always did do well, was a relatively equal balance across the board with power across all classes and builds, which is what makes D2 a lot of fun, and it's the reason why it's getting resurrected, and it's the reason why the modding community kept it alive to this day. It has its faults, and it knows what its faults are, but it is just an all-around good game, and the developers never thought to really smash builds into unplayable levels. And for 7 different types of characters, the number of skills you get is quite insurmountable, and the ways that you can play it based on the way that you craft and everything else is quite fun. Now, the second way of crafting is Herodric Cube crafting. This is a little more complicated, and this is for like the really ultra hardcore players. But basically, you can take different items that drop in different areas, gems, runes. You can then roll them in your Herodric Cube and chance recipe craft things similar to, like, Chaos Orbs or Exalt Orbs and things like that, and roll all sorts of different modifiers. This is one thing that I didn't really do when I played the game. I really focused on rune words, and that sort of got me through most of the game, because most players craft with rune words. And then, your odd unique, depending on the type of build, and uniques can really buff builds. Necromancers in Diablo 2 are next level, though not the most powerful characters. Definitely my favorite picks are like the Hammerden or the Cyclone Barbarian, and you can create some fucking crazy builds, which I'm so excited to do. Again, Cyclone Barb is like one of my favorite character builds in Diablo 2 of all time. It's probably what I'm going to play on the weekend. Trading. So item 3, trading. There is no real... There used to be a forum, I think, for trading. There is an in-game trading mechanism, so it is a feature, and from my understanding of reading the notes that are coming out with D2R, they still will have trading enabled. Whether or not they do something similar to Path of Exile is another thing, depending on the way that the developer looks at, or Blizzard's looking at, sorry, I shouldn't say Blizzard, but the developer that's been subcontracted through Blizzard to resurrect Diablo 2. They may see that there's a need to have a similar trading system, and hopefully they do, and that would be really cool. So trading is in the game, but nowhere near what Diablo 2 does with a whole trading website and things like that. And even that needs to be overhauled and embedded in the game. But you know, that it does exist in D2, and it always has. But it's not to the level of Path of Exile. You know, we're talking about a 20-year-old game, and the way that they resurrected the game was adding some quality of life, but keeping it true to its original, you know, state, which is great. Now, difficulty. This is a fourth point. It's probably the last point that I'll talk about. And, you know, there's a lot to talk about Diablo 2, but I really wanted to make a quick video to sort of give people an idea of what to expect when they play it on the weekend. And we only get the first 2 acts. So Diablo 2 is not a kind game for the faint-hearted, but that's what makes it fun. So where PoE is sort of dabbling in right now with the expedition content in damage immunities is not something that hasn't been done in games before. In fact, Diablo 2 was the first to do it, at least to my understanding. Now, pardon me, when you work through Nightmare and you get through the game, you can play builds. For example, there's a build referred to as an Oradin, so basically like a Auracaster, sort of like Death Oath in Path of Exile. You can play it on the Paladin. You can run, like, usually you run it with chilling auras or lightning auras or holy fire auras, for example. And you can get rune words that buff up holy fire, and you basically sort of similar like skill gem levels. You have skill levels that come with certain rune words or rune gear. And so when you get past Nightmare, and it does kick a little bit of Nightmare, and you move into Hell. Hell actually then throws a large number of damage immune packs at you, which is where you have to buff up your companion, and then they run around and you have to gear your companion up to basically do your bidding. That's sort of where Diablo 2 is much more difficult. Hell is unforgiving, and it is a complete murder fest. If you're not equipped for Hell, if you haven't farmed correctly, you just simply won't survive. And in fact, a lot of players that sort of casually played Diablo 2 back, you know, whenever, and even those that probably have played it since, will maybe get through Nightmare and then get to Hell, and Hell is just, it is what it sounds like. It is punishment. But in the fun way, like not a really terrible way. I can really see Diablo 2 being fun for those hardcore bloody masochists that just want to test their bloody willpower to play another turn and re-roll and then die all over again. But that's what gives Diablo its, I guess, while it has an absence of a really robust endgame, the leveling through the game is consistent enough that you get to level 100 by the end of, you can get to level 80 to 100 by the end of the game, but you sort of do that when you bail run and things like that in Hell, and that's sort of what makes it fun. Is it impossible to get to Hell if you're a casual player? Absolutely not. And, you know, I haven't played Path of Diablo and things like that consistently, but I've gotten, I think, through Nightmare into Hell pretty easily. It took me a few days, but I've played the game a lot. And there's a bit of a learning curve to when you're first learning the game. Maybe the other side of it is build diversity. Like I said in the start, you know, builds aren't really hampered by the game itself. The content has always been challenging after you get through, you know, certain portions of Nightmare in Diablo 2. And I don't see there being any exception in D2R. Pardon me. There's a lot of fun builds. Warcry builds with the Barbarian where you scream and everything dies around you. Davazons. You've got bloody arrow builds. You've got trappers with the ninja. I think it is ninja? Assassin. As I say, Hammerdans, Oradins, pretty much anything Paladin, Zeals. There's just a lot. Necromancers are really fun in Diablo 2, like crazy fun. You can have like 50, 60 minions on the screen depending on your gearing and runed up gear and different uniques in the game. There's a lot in Diablo 2 which makes Diablo 2, you know, in my opinion, one of the best games to have ever walked the ARPG isometric field. And it's why I always go back to it. Even to this day, I play modded versions such as, you know, Path of Diablo, and different things like that. There's a Project Diablo is the other one that I was playing a few months ago, and I had a lot of fun with that. And Median XL is getting a 4K mod, which looks really cool. So that's maybe some sum up of Diablo 2, and sort of what to expect. It's if you're stepping into it expecting Diablo Path of Exile, then no. And there's a lot of things that Path of Exile is now taking from Diablo 2 and not getting it right. Because quite frankly, Path of Exile is a very different game to Diablo 2. While it has a lot of similarities in areas, it's not the same game. For them to sort of copy Diablo 2 and slow the pace is crazy. And even Diablo 2 can be played incredibly zoomy in different areas. It does have a slower pace, but you feel powerful in Diablo 2 once you start to level up and get the gear that you need and everything. Whereas Path of Exile's still just not getting that right in its current sort of form. And I'm not going to go into any detail with it because we all know where the game's currently at. It is not in the best state that it could be in, which is why I'm doing a video on, well, actually, I would have done a video on D2R anyway. I fucking love Diablo. Diablo's a great game. Except for Diablo 3, that was trash. Diablo 2 is a great game. Anyway, if this video gives you some ideas about what to expect with the up-and-coming open beta, then yeah, I'm hoping that I've helped in some way, shape, and form. I'm actually going to put the website to the Ariat Summit. It's sort of like an FAQ. The similarities between the Resurrected version of the game and the original game are not, there's no real differences from what we've been told. Runing's going to be the same, crafting's going to be the same, leveling's going to be the same, except it's going to look sexy. The game looks great. I really like the look of D2. D2R, that is. And I like the fact that they're keeping it, true to its origins, which is nice. It's good to see it. Even though with all the controversy with Blizzard right now, the sub-developer I'm going to refer to, because they're, a company that got brought into Blizzard like 12 months ago. I think it's going to be an amazing game. So yeah, anyway, if this video helps, like and sub, post something in the comments. I'm sure there's plenty of people that watch my channel and play Path of Exile that came from D2 back in the day. And if any of you are watching and you want to put a comment in or anything like that, or have a chat about anything, put it in the comments, man. Let's start a dialogue with this. This game is amazing, and I am over the moon to see it getting remastered, because quite frankly, it is one of my all-time favorite games. And when I think of pretty much ARPGs in general, the benchmark is Diablo 2. At ExileCon, we met David Brevik, and he was awesome, and it was fantastic to meet someone that had made something that had stuck with me for years, from when I was a bloody dirty little salesman at EB Games through to where I am now. Diablo 2 has been around through all of that with me thick and thin. But anyway, until next time, like and sub, and bye.